Hello everyone, I am Yuriko Kelta, and for today's video lecture, we are going to tackle Philippine mythology, legendary deities, Luzon divinities. Philippine mythology is much more important than you think. It gave our ancestors a sense of direction and helped them explain everything from the origin of mankind to the existence of diseases. This learning video will focus on the discussion of the Philippine deities, particularly the Luzon divinities. Students will now have an idea of the most powerful deities in the Philippines during the ancient times. These deities are the counterpart of the Greek gods and goddesses we grew up studying in mythology. Before we start with our discussion, here are the objectives of this lesson. First, identify the different gods and goddesses of Filipino mythology. Second, recognize how myths influence the local culture. And third, appreciate the cultural heritage of the Filipinos through myths and legends. An ultimate guide to Philippine mythology's legendary deities, Luzon divinities. For them, Philippine mythology was not just a belief in invisible higher beings. Philippine mythology defined who they were and what they are supposed to do. The late anthropologist H. Otley Beyer shared his own observation. Myths are mostly preserved as folk tales among the Christianized inhabitants of the plains, but their recitation and preservation in the mountains are a true and essential aspect of daily religious lives. Very few of these myths are written. Usually, only oral tradition retains them. In Philippine mythology, there is no one-size-fits-all law. In other words, old Filipinos from all over the world have not kept a single version of artistic history and have not assigned their deities standardized names. As a result, Philippine mythology was so complex that it now appears like a compilation of Pokemon gazillions. Now, before we go straight to the most exciting part, it's important that we first go back to the basics. What exactly is Philippine mythology? Philippine mythology is a series of stories and superstitions about the deities of magic which our ancestors believed to rule. The traditional knowledge that is integrated in our society includes the arts, folk literature, traditions, faiths, and games, among other things. It's part of folklore. You will find folk literature branching in three categories: folk songs, folk narratives included with bugtong or riddles, and proverbs. Folk narratives are all about stories. It could be told in prose, verse, or both. And it is further divided into three subcategories: the folktales or kwentong bayan, legends or alamat, and myths. Moving on to the next one, the folktales are pure fiction, something that you use to entertain bored kids. The legends and myths, meanwhile, are assumed to be true by the storyteller. Only it's the timeline that sets them apart. So, while legends happened in a much more recent time period, myths are believed to have taken place in the remote past. So, meaning it happened in a period when the world as we know it today wasn't fully formed yet. In here, we can see the folklore tree family from Filipino. And at the bottom of the tree, we're going to discuss myths. According to the late Damiana L. Eugenio, the mother of Philippine folklore, myths are the account for the origin of the world, of mankind, of death, or for characteristics of birds, animals, geographical features, and the phenomena of nature. The stories or adventures of deities defined as human characteristic supernatural beings fall under this subcategory. These are good and bad deities, and each has a particular function. And popular anthropologist F. Landa Hocano has further explained the Philippine mythology through this outline. Many of these gods are quite close. Some are residents of faraway realm of the sky world who only take an interest in human problems when they are called upon to come down to earth during proper ceremonies. Take note that all images presented in this video are modern depiction of our ancient deities. History tells us that representations of these gods and goddesses created by our ancestors were burned by the colonizers. Therefore, the point of these illustrations is not to westernize Philippine mythology, but to make it more appealing and engaging to the younger readers who ought to know more about their roots. Now, let's start. The ancient Tagalogs believed in one creating God based on the early accounts of the Spanish conquistador Miguel de Luarca. They had no power to communicate directly with him, however, there was a need for an intercessor or middleman. The spirit of their deceased parent or any of the lower deities may be the intermediate. Old gods are generally worshipped as adobe carvings called likha, whereas the dead ancestors revered themselves by offering food or gold to wooden images known as anito. Please note the early missionaries varied in the way anito was described. So for example, Father Pedro de San Buenaventura insisted that the word nag-aanito referred to the offering and not to the spirit itself, which is pinag-aanitohan. The ancient Tagalogs venerated animals like crocodiles as well as deities and spirits of departed creatures, for they believed that the human spirits are found in these wild beasts. Consequently, a tigmamanukan bird flying across someone's path was considered an omen. This bird will predict whether an attempt will be successful or disastrous, depending on the direction of its flight. The first Luzon Divinities we'll discuss is Batala. He is also known as Aba, and he is considered the highest among the deities and described as may kapal sa lahat, or the maker of everything. His origin is unknown, but his name suggests Hindu influences. Bathala is derived from Sanskrit Bathara, which means noble lord, according to William Henry Scott. The god watches over the human race from his house in heaven called Kawalhatian, and he is satisfied if his people obey his laws to the degree that they ruin them, and so the ideology of bahala na. Yet, you know that this great god may also often be cruel, bringing lightning and thunder to those who have sinned against him. An interesting fact, further native groups in Luzon also believed in a creator god, but they didn't call him Batala. For instance, the Bontocs and Kankanais of the Central Cordillera considered Lumawig as their creator of all things and the protector of life. So this deity later sired two pretty daughters, Bugan, the goddess of romance, and Oban, the goddess of reproduction. Aside from Lumawig, those of Benguet have described Apo as their highest god, though the Ifugaos have their own kabunian. The latter was thought to have lived in the fifth region of the universe, and it was supported by other minor gods. The first one is Tayaban, the fire-looking god of death. Gatuwi, the god of practical jokes, who were also blamed for making miscarriages between the Ifugao mothers. And lastly, we have Hidit, the gods in rituals who punished those who broke taboo. On the other hand, the early people of Zambales called their highest deity Malayari. Unlike the Tagalog's Bathala, this creator god blessed its adorers with good health and harvest, and punished the unbelievers with illness and hunger. The lesser gods also supported Malayari in his tasks. Among them is Akasi, the god of sickness and health, the god of strength and wealth, Manglubar, who had the duty of pacifying the heart of anger, and lastly, mga labar, the guardian angel, or the god of good grace. If Batala was the superior being, the other lesser deities who lived with him in the sky were his subordinates. Each of these lower ranking gods and goddesses had specific accountabilities, and one of them was Idianali in other sources. She is the goddess of labor and good deeds. There are varying versions as to what specific field Idianale was revered for. And according to historian Gregorio Zaide, Idianale was the god of agriculture, while other bases proposed that she was the patron of animal husbandry, a division of agriculture. Idianale married Dumangan, the god of good harvest, and later gave birth to two more Tagalog deities, Dumakalem and Anitun Tabu. Our next god is Dumangan, the Tagalog sky god of good harvest, the husband of Idianale, and father to Dumakalem and Anitun Tabu. In Zambales culture, the rice developed better grain because of Dumangan or Dumagan. Furthermore, F. Landahocano mentioned that the early inhabitants of Zambales also thought that Dumagan had three brothers as powerful as he was. It is believed that Kalasakas hastened the ripening of the rice stalks, while Kalasokus was accountable for turning the grains into yellow. Finally, the Damulag deity protected the rice plant's flowers from devastating hurricanes. Now let's talk about Anitun Tabu. Amongst the earliest Tagalogs, Anitun Tabu was acknowledged as the fickle-minded goddess of the wind and rain. She is one of the two offspring of Dumangan and Idianale. In Zambales, this divinity was acknowledged as Anitun Tawo, one of the lesser deities supporting their chief god Malayari. And legend has it that Anitun Tawo was once the liberated superior to other Zambales deities. However, she became so full of herself that Malayari abridged her rank as a punishment. The Zambales people used to offer her with the best kind of pinipig or pulverized new rice grains during harvest season. Sacrifices that made use of these ingredients are identified as mamiarag in their local dialect. Moving on, let's have Dumakalem. So Dumakalem was the son of Idianale and Dumangan, and he is a brother of wind goddess Anitun Tabu. The ancient Tagalogs honored him as the protector of the mountains. He is often portrayed as a strong and clever hunter. This Tagalog sky god married another major deity, Anagolay, known as the goddess of lost things. The union produced two offsprings, Apolaki, the sun god, and Dian Masalanta, the goddess of lovers. Next, we have Ikapati or Lakapati, which perhaps was one of the most fascinating divinities of Philippine mythology. She was the Tagalog goddess of fertility, and according to F. Landa Hocano, she was the goddess of the cultivated land and the benevolent giver of food and prosperity. Other sources label Lakapati as androgynous, hermaphrodite, and even a transgender god. Actually, in William Henry Scott's Barangay, Lakapati is described as a major fertility deity symbolized by a hermaphrodite image with both male and female parts. The old Tagalog usually offered Lakapati sacrifices before planting in a new field. In a text by the Franciscan missionary Father Pedro de San Buenaventura of the 17th century, it was said that a farmer paying honor to the goddess of fertility should take a child before saying, Lakapati, pakanin mo yaring alipin mo, huwag mong gutumin. Or translated into English, Lakapati, feed this thy slave, let him not hunger. Lakapati was loved and revered by the people as an infant among the mother deities of Batala. She married the god of seasons Mapulon and became the mother of Anagolay, goddess of lost things. In Tagalog mythology, Mapulon was the god of seasons. F. Landa Hocano in the book Outline of Mythology labeled Mapulon as one of the lesser divinities assisting Batala. And unfortunately, not much is known about this deity, aside from he wedded Ikapati or Lakapati, the fertility goddess, and sired Anagolay, the goddess of lost things. Let's move on to Anagolay. So the pre-colonial Tagalogs who were desperately searching for their lost things pleaded to Anagolay because she was the goddess of lost things. She was the offspring of two major Tagalog divinities, Ikapati and Mapulon. She wedded with the hunter Dumakalim and gave birth to two more goddesses, Apolaki and Masalanta, the ancient gods of sun and lovers correspondingly. And an interesting fact about her was that an asteroid was named after her. Apolaki originally appeared in many ancient myths to be the Filipino equivalent of the Roman god Mars. He was venerated by the Tagalogs as the sun god and as warrior father. Actually, the sun god of war and death Ari Sinukuan bears almost identical attributes. Pangasinan early people said Apolaki spoke to them. Back when the black teeth of beauty were known, some of these indigenous people told a friar that they were accused by a dissatisfied Apolaki to have foreigners with white teeth welcomed. And in an article published by William Henry Scott, the name of this deity is said to have originated from Apo, which means Lord, and Laki, which means male or viril. On Hocano's outline of the Philippine mythology, it details how Apolaki came to be. He was the son of Anagolay and Dumakulam, and also the brother of Masalanta, the goddess of lovers. However, in another story, Apolaki was actually the son of the ancient Tagalog supreme god Batala. In Maximo Ramos' book Philippine Myths, Legends and Folk Tales, it tells how the sun became brighter than the moon. In that myth, Bathala had a mortal woman to sire two children. He called Apolaki his son and Mayari his daughter. Both offspring had eyes so bright that they become the source of light for the rest of the world. Eventually, when Bathala died, Apolaki and Mayari both wanted to be the ruler, and an extensive, bloody dispute arose as neither one of them wanted to give up the throne. The fight reached the boiling point when Apolaki hit Mayari's face with a wooden club, blinding her one eye. Cooler heads prevailed and the two decided to just take turns in ruling the world. Apolaki is now on the throne at daytime, while Mayari, the goddess of the moon, provides the night with a sweet, gentle sun. If the Greeks had Aphrodite, their Tagalog ancestors had Masalanta, the patron goddess of lovers and childbirth. This deity was the brother of the sun god Apolaki to parents Anagolay and Dumakulam. Masalanta was given concessions to ensure that pregnancies were successful. The same applies to other smaller gods that governed certain domains such as Mankukutod, the protector of coconut palm, which if was not offered could cause accidents. Haik, the god of the sea, has been honored by seaplanes for healthy and successful journey, while Uwinansana, the god of the forest, has been acknowledged that no one is punished for infringing on his lands. The chief protector of the sea, on the other hand, was Amansinaya or Amanisaya in other references, who gave his devotees a good catch. In the book authored by William Henry Scott, Amansinaya was labeled as the god called upon by believers when first wetting a net or fish hook. He was also acknowledged as the father of Sinaya, who developed the fishing gear. This is in contrast with the work of the anthropologist F. Landahokano. In his relatively modern version, Amanikabli was one of the lesser gods assisting Batala in Kawalhatian. He was described as the husky, ill-tempered ruler of the sea, whose abhorrence towards human beings started when a beautiful mortal woman, aptly named Maganda, rejected his love. Since then, the sea god had made it his plan to send turbulent waves and horrible tempests every now and then to wreck boats and drown men. Moving on, let's hear the story of Tala, Mayari, and Hannah. But Hala once fell in love with the mortal lady. However, upon giving birth to three lovely daughters, she died. Of course, but Hala didn't want anything bad to happen to his girl, so he brought all three of them to the sky to live with him. Eventually, these three demigods were given specific roles. Tala, Mayari, Hana or Hanan in other references became the Tagalog goddesses of the star, moon, and morning respectively. F. Landa Hocano in the book Philippine Mythology gave a flattering description of the moon goddess. It says she was the most beautiful divinity in the court of Batala. In the other Luzon myths, however, the moon deity was anything but a beautiful goddess. Next, the origin of the sun, moon, and the stars was discussed in a Pangasinan myth. The story started with an all-powerful god called Ama giving a blistering palace to each of his two sons, Ageo the sun and Bulan the moon. Such two gods will cross the globe with their palaces every day to give the people glory. And actually, Ageo and Bulan are similar to the Bible's Cain and Abel. Between the two, Bulan was the ill-behaved one. And when he ear-rigged a group of pilfers wishing for obscurity so they could steal and inflict chaos to human beings, Bulan was thrilled. He then asked his brother Ageo to quickly leave the earth so his evil friends could do their business. However, when Ageo refused, a heated argument took place. Aware of everything that happened, Batala was furious at Bulan. So from his abode in the sky, he seized an enormous rock and hurled it whistling through the air. It hit Bulan's palace, breaking it into pieces. The flickering fragments became the stars. Since then, Bulan has been forbidden from uniting with his brother in the nation. He still lives in a fiery tower, but his light barely suffices in the night to guide the thieves. Not all Philippine deities with Bathala were living in the sky. Some of them coexisted with the old Tagalogs and were literally invoked by Catalonian during religious ceremonies. These supernatural beings were called by Spanish lexicographers Anito, agents of Bathala who had special functions assigned. Three of the most involved of minority deities, Lacanbacod, Lacandanum, and Lacambini, were called together. In William Henry Scott's barangay, Lacanbacod or Lacambacod in other sources was described as a deity who had gilded genitals as long as a rice stalk. The Lord of Fences, who covered crops as powerful to keep animals out of farmland, was Lacanbacod. Therefore, while fencing a plot of land, he was invoked and given eels. So next, we have Lacambini, a goddess that was interesting just as much. So while the word nowadays is virtually synonymous with muse, that wasn't the case early on. Up until the 19th century, Lacandini had been the given name to an Anito whom Fray San Buenaventura described as Diyos-Diyosang sumasakop siya sa mga sakit sa lalamunan. In simple English, this minor deity was invoked by our ancestors to treat throat ailments. We also have Lacandanum, a water deity which was portrayed as a snake-like mermaid among the ancient Kapampangans. They would also throw animals into the river before the Spaniards came to Lacandanum as a peace offering, and in no circumstances have long drought been the result. The indigenous people prayed to the water god every year during the dry season, and when the rain began to pour, the Lacandanum would be taken as an indicator that everyone would be in a festive mood. In addition, in honor of Lacandanum, the old Kapampangan New Year, which is known as Bayang Danum, it means literally fresh water. The Christianity was St. John's Festival at Pampanga and St. Peter's Festival in other places. It came into the picture. Galang Kaluluwa and Ulilang Kaluluwa. Batala was not the only divine god who existed in the world before mankind was born in some Tagalog creation myths. The serpent Ulilang Kaluluwa or orphan spirit lived on the clouds, and the wandering king Galang Kaluluwa shared the region with the other two powerful gods. And the story about Galang Kaluluwa and Ulilang Kaluluwa was that Ulilang Kaluluwa was searching for himself and the earth and the rest of the universe, and he decided to fight when he heard that Batala was doing the same thing. However, Batala was the last man standing after days of non-stop fighting, and Ulilang Kaluluwa's dead body was burned afterwards. On the other hand, Bathala and Galang Kaluluwa met a few years back. A few years later, both were friends, and Bathala even invited Galang Kaluluwa to stay in his kingdom. But Galang Kaluluwa's life was reduced to a disease. On request of his father, Bathala buried the body at the same location that was once burned by Ulilang Kaluluwa. The tombs soon grew up a mysterious tree. Bathala was remembered by his departed friends' fruit and wing-like leaves, while the rough and attractive trunk was as nice as Ulilang Kaluluwa. The tree, as it turned out, is the tree of life. We greatly value today, and it's called the coconut. The coconut tree was so significant that Bathala built a house for them using its roots and its leaves, as he had decided to make the first man and woman. Their normal sustenance has been proved nutritious by the coconut juice and the succulent white meat. It wasn't long until they discovered more secret gifts from the tree. The leaves could become a strong tuberculosis or barbed walls, while the fiber, among others, could be sturdy ropes. Next, we have Halia, the moon goddess of Bicolano mythology, who periodically comes down to earth to bathe in its waters. According to legend, the world was lit by 7 moons. Bakunawa, a legendary creature found in the early Bicolano and Hiligaynon culture, was a giant sea serpent and ate all of these bodies. In other myths, the rest of the world was spared after the gods had come to save the sea serpent and punished it. Another story suggests that Halia was the name of the last moon and she was not consumed because of the noise with drums and gongs. These sounds were repulsive to the Bakunawa. Bakunawa were accused of causing eclipse by pre-colonial Philippines. His name was first published in a dictionary of 1637 by Father Mentrida de Alonso, which literally means bent serpent. In our ancient culture, Bakunawa was profoundly rooted in that period. The name of the sea serpent was already synonymous with the eclipse, published in 1688 by Ignacio Alsina, Historias de las Islas y Indios de las Visayas. The citizens of the Hiligaynon in the Visayas claim that the Bakunawa resides between the sky and the clouds, or in the bungalog, between the headwaters of large fluvial systems. Trusting that an eclipse was actually a Bakunawa trying to gulp the moon, ancient Visayans tried to ward off the monster by crafting sounds. They did this by striking the floors of their houses or by beating cans, drums, and the like. Somehow, long before the colonists introduced us to the Bible, our Tagalog ancestors already believed in the concept of afterlife. The pre-colonial customs, which may take the form of jewelry, food, or even the dead bird with a pabaon, are the evidences. And actually, the heaven of today and hell had old parallels too. Hocano said early Tagalogs believed that good people should go to Maka, a place of eternal harmony and gladness. On the other hand, the evil sinners were forced into the Kasanaan, a village of affliction and sorrow. So the Kasanaan is a place of punishment ruled by Satan, which shares striking similarities with Christianity's ultimate villain, Satan. Though Hukana said that Satan was most likely derived from the Islamic ruler of the underworld named Satan or Shaitan, this suggests that the Muslim religion already had a grip to our society way before the Spaniards arrived. So just like Batala, the vicious Satan was also assisted by other lesser deities or mortal agents. First was Manggagaway, the wicked shapeshifter who wore a skull necklace and could kill or heal anyone with the use of her magic wand. She could also delay one's death for weeks or even months by simply binding a snake containing her potion around the person's waist. Next, we have Mansisilat. Mansisilat was literally the homewrecker of Philippine mythology. As the goddess of broken homes, she accepted it as her personal mission to destroy relationships. She did this by disguising herself as an old beggar or healer who would enter the homes of unsuspecting couples. Using her charms, Mansisilat could magically turn their husbands and wives against each other, ending up in separation. Equally frightening to Manggagaway and Mansisilat are Hukluban and Mankukulam. So, in William Henry Scott's Barangay, the former was described as the most powerful kind of witch, able to kill or cause unconsciousness simply by greeting a person. Hukano added that a hukluban was also a terrific shapeshifter who could make anything happen, say, burn a house down by simply uttering it. Lastly, we have the mankukulam. Uh, the mankukulam often wandered around villages pretending to be a priest or doctor. In the same book by Scott, a mankukulam was described as a witch who appears at night as if burning, setting fires that cannot be extinguished, or wallows in the fifth under houses, whereupon some householder will sicken and die. And that would be all for Philippine mythology, legendary deities, Luzon divinities. Again, I am Yuriko Kelda, and thank you for watching.